Hi and welcome to A Film I Love, brought to you by the Cambridge Film Festival. And this time, the first guest that I can only just say welcome to A Film I Love, because she's a core member of the Cambridge Film Trust, so I don't need to welcome you to the Trust. It's Isabelle McNeill, Chair and co-founder of the Cambridge Film Trust. Hello, welcome to A Film I Love. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. It's really a delight.
Well, thank you so much for choosing such a brilliant film, The Miseducation of Cameron Post, which we will get onto in just a moment. But I would love to have a chat with you, Isabelle. So we see each other in the trustees meeting. So we see each other every month or so, obviously in the last year over Zoom, but normally it used to be in real life. But I'd love to ask you a few questions just about the Cambridge Film Trust, just because I feel like there are probably lots of people who love the Cambridge Film Festival, but might not be aware of the things that the Trust does throughout the year. Speaking of which, obviously this last year has been a really different one to one that we're used to. How has it been for the Cambridge Film Trust? What has the Cambridge Film Trust been up to in the last year?
Well, we, like many other festivals, had to think fast and adapt quickly, and we realised that we weren't going to be able to have an in-person festival in the autumn as we would normally have done, as we had planned to do earlier in the year. But talking with some other festivals like Bath and Brighton, we came up with this idea of doing the Amplify Film Festival, which was an online collaborative film festival. And that was actually really great. None of us really knew. A few of our team had experienced some early online film festivals, which had been sort of okay, but obviously very hastily adapted. We had a little bit more time, only just, and it was actually surprisingly good. I think anyone who saw the films there, I mean, it was a brilliant program for one thing, and I think the collaboration element of that was really good. But also, actually, there are ways of making online film viewing feel a bit more communal and feel a bit more festival-like, just by having the Q&As, by having introductions. So I really enjoyed it, and I was glad that we did it, even though it was quite hair-raising in a way. Have to pull something so new off so quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And I think working with other film festivals around the UK as well must have been, a learning experience for everyone really as well. It's kind of nice to see how other festivals work and what goes on there behind the scenes. And so in a normal year with the festival, have you got kind of, I'd like to ask you about things that you're particularly proud of with the Cambridge Film Festival. There must be so many examples, but in recent times, pre-COVID, what were your kind of most proud moments of the Cambridge Film Festival as of the events?
Yeah, well, I think one of my highlights of all time is probably doing the Q&As for Rocks, which was a film made by Sarah Gavron, Teresa Ikoko and Claire Wilson, as well as with the amazing cast. It was a true collaborative piece of filmmaking. And so the three of them were there, and they were absolutely brilliant to talk to. And so I don't know if that's really me feeling proud. I didn't program the film myself, but I felt just excited to be a part of those events. They did 2 Q&As, so it was very generous of them to give lots of their time to the festival. And it was amazing to meet them and to discover their ethos of filmmaking, a real amazing collaboration between women. Which is quite pertinent to Cameron Post as well.
Yes, true, very true. And also because that was the opening film for the 2019 Cambridge Film Festival, which I suppose shows the impact of COVID on the film industry with regards to the fact that the BAFTA nominations, at the time of you and I speaking, the awards haven't happened yet, but Rox has got some brilliant nominations. And so that sort of gestation period, or even just the delayed release, it must be quite gratifying, I suppose, to see these films, to watch films at the film festival, and then to see them go on to do, to get awards and to get success and to have critical success as well.
Yeah, it's really exciting when that happens.
And I think one of the things that the Trust has done, because the Trust as a independent charity, we obviously, the money we raise goes into the festival, but in this last year doing the At Home series, part of it is what we're doing right now with A Film I Love, part of it is our youth lab, who are a bunch of really, really, really keen, aspiring filmmakers, film critics, film reviewers, possibly film festival organisers. So I was wanting to ask you on behalf of them, as someone who is involved in the running of a film festival, well, firstly, why do you think film festivals are still necessary? Why do you think they're an important part of our lives?
I am a great believer in film festivals. It's perhaps not a great surprise that I would say that, but I think that they do two main things. One of them is to show films that just otherwise would not get seen or would not get seen by those audiences. So they have a really important role to play in promoting independent cinema, world cinema, all kinds of interesting and strange and wonderful films that otherwise might not get a chance to be seen, because it can be really hard to get your film distributed outside of the film festival circuit. And then the other thing they do, I think possibly even in the age of Zoom and COVID, is to bring people together around films. So they do make conversations happen between filmmakers and their audiences, between audience members, and kind of that really feeds into the industry as well. So I think they have a really important role to play in kind of keeping cinema diverse, interesting, challenging, and to keep the conversations about cinema going.
Definitely. And advice for any youth lab members who might be wanting to set up any film festivals, which obviously is a huge undertaking, but what do you feel what would a good bit of advice be from your experience?
Well, I think it definitely is a challenging enterprise, and maybe a good way to start out would be to collaborate with a pre-existing film festival and perhaps get into organising a strand with them, or doing some kind of collaborative work with a festival that already exists, so you can get that experience of how to program, how the whole thing works. I mean, actually volunteering is a great way of understanding how a festival works. That's how I got into it. I volunteered to be I volunteered to be a reviewer for the then Festival Daily, as it was called, which was the festival newspaper. Back in the day, they used to publish like a daily newspaper. And now we have Take One, which sort of continues a relationship with the festival, but does all kinds of things all year round. But back then it was just during the festival, and I actually got offered to be an editor of that, unexpectedly to me, and I'd never done anything like that before, so it was a real baptism of fire. But because it was a small team, I really understood a lot. I learned a lot about how the festival worked from just getting involved and volunteering my time and skills, such as they were. But also, I mean, before that, I was also very passionate about showing films and film exhibitions. So I just had this, from studying film, I had these films I wanted people to see, and I wanted to organise events. I wanted to get people together in the cinema talking about film. So I was kind of pestering Tony Jones, who was the festival director back then, asking, can you do this? Can I put on an entire retrospective of everything that Jean-Luc Godard has ever done? Which ended up being one screening in the end, but it was a lot of effort, but it paid off, and it was great. It was a great event. So yeah, keep asking people, keep contacting people, keep those conversations going, and try and expand your networks.
Brilliant. And I'm talking of sharing the experience, the film experience, let's go on to your film choice. Can you tell us about the first time you watched The Miseducation of Cameron Post?
Well, I am very happy to go back to that moment, because it was in a cinema, and that's something that we're all missing a lot. And it was in the Arts Picture House in Cambridge. It was the premiere screening for Cambridge when the film came out in 2018, and I went with a really good friend of mine, so it was brilliant to go together. That thing when you go with a friend and you're excited about it and get to talk about it afterwards. And not only that, but Desiree Akhavan was there doing the Q&A, so I got to sort of get a bit of a flavour of her personality, and of a bit of extra sense of the behind the scenes of the film as well. So it was
can you remember anything she said? Was there anything about the film or the filmmaking?
Yeah, I think the main thing that I really remember is just how much she talked about the other women who worked with her on the film. So that was something that my friend and I both really noticed and admired and appreciated, was that she wasn't just like, well, I did this, I did that. She was constantly talking about her editor. She was talking about Cecilia Frugiule, who wrote the screenplay with her. She was talking about Ashley Connor, who did the cinematography. And so she was constantly talking about these other people that she'd worked with, and their role in it, and how important they'd been in bringing it together. So it really felt like a kind of, a sense of solidarity and working together, which I think is so often diminished and not valued enough in art and filmmaking. So that was really brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. I've watched some interviews with her and some of the cast members, and I definitely get that feeling too, that she's willing for everyone to sort of take pride in the work that they've collectively done as a team. And I think in one of the interviews she said, so it was mainly shot on location, as in this one location of the gay conversion camp. Which I don't think is a spoiler, because that's a central part of the film. I think it took like 23 days, and it was shot chronologically, which I found really interesting, because that's quite rare, I imagine, in a lot of films. But for you, with the central performances, are there any in particular that stand out to you that you're keen to talk about here?
I can't not mention Chloe Moretz as Cameron Post, the main character. I think she's absolutely brilliant. And actually, talking about collaboration, in another interview, Desiree Akhavan did say that Chloe Moretz brought a lot to the character. So she brought her own perspectives. She brought her own ideas to that character. So it's definitely a kind of co-created character. And I think there's so much that she captures, that kind of teenage awkwardness, the rebelliousness, the confusion, just with very understated acting. So I think she's brilliant. But I also am a massive Sacha Lane fan. So I love the character of Jane Fonda, as she's hilariously called.
Yeah, she's brilliant. What does she bring? What does she bring to that role? Like, how would you describe her character?
She has such a kind of sort of soft toughness, I think, which I love. She is, she's funny as well. She's very funny. But I'm thinking about her as well. She plays a totally different young woman, but also brilliantly in Andrea Arnold's American Honey. And in there too, she's just got such a kind of a sense of kind of almost like a vibrating screen presence somehow. There's so much going on underneath the surface, and yeah, she's not going to tell you what it is, but she's always going to stick up for herself. And I think there's that kind of just that resistance, which is very, very important in the context of the Miseducation of Cameron Post, because she is a character who comes to embody like the possibility of resistance and not just accepting of that environment.
I think what you mentioned about the humor element is really important, because obviously the subject matter is pretty harrowing. But one of the interviews, Desiree said, where are my notes? Yeah, she described it, and I thought this was interesting, as her ode to John Hughes and a John Hughes film, because she said that there was levity and pathos within, the more serious subject matter. And it's an interesting balance that it manages to take, I think, it is funny at times, even though, what the characters are going through is really awful for a lot of it. It's really awful, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's brilliant. I think cinema really often finds itself kind of torn between showing like a grim reality and sort of exposing that to the world, reflecting that to the world, or kind of imagining some more joyful, fantastical alternative. And one of the things I love about this film is how it manages to bring those two things together. The humor is part of that, but it's also just the way the story unfolds, and the characters and the interactions between the characters unfold, so that there's this sort of terrible, traumatic thing that they're being put through, but it's also, they've put a bunch of gay teens together, and for the first time they're able to actually find other gay people around them, and so that ends up kind of producing this brilliantly kind of contrary effect, and there's quite a bizarrely uplifting quality to it, and amongst some, yeah, as you say, like harrowing, grim, kind of cruel aspects. I think the historical setting is quite interesting. That makes me feel old to say historical setting, because it's set in 1993 and I was a teenager then, I was 14. And so it definitely brought back memories, even though I, you know, grew up in the UK and in a completely different environment. It definitely brought back memories of that era. And so when I saw it in the cinema, there were these moments where I felt like sort of young, I don't know, student-aged people in the audience were laughing at some things where I was kind of not laughing, because to me that just brought back that kind of real homophobic intensity of that time. And I think that things have changed for the better quite a bit since then, and I thought that it was great to see people reacting in that way, because it was like, yeah, it seems so absurd, it just seems absurd. The whole idea of this kind of gay conversion just seems completely ridiculous to people now, even though, I mean, it does still go on, I think, but you know, there's a real sense of a change, of more possibilities are opening up for young people, which is brilliant.
Yes, definitely. And actually some of the things that the chief kind of villain, I suppose we can call her, of the piece, played by Jennifer Ely, like the main doctor who founded the gay conversion camp, some of the things she says are almost laughable, because they're so kind of awful, how she's twisting things. She's twisting her knowledge of psychology and kind of to suit her own agenda in a way. But how would you describe her performance?
I think it's brilliant, and I think the whole film is very clever in being very generous to all of the characters. So even though she is, yeah, she's absolutely the villain, and she's even described within the film in those terms at a very funny moment in the film. But yeah, I think what she brings to it is this: you really feel that she's well intentioned. You know, you really feel that she's kind of doing her best. And that she kind of believes in what she's doing, and that kind of unravels a bit over the course of the film, and you know, you see her kind of losing her grip on this situation in which when you first meet her, she's in complete control, and then, you know, gradually you see that kind of unravel. So I think she's brilliant in it.
Yeah, she's such a, I mean, you know, every role she plays, like I was watching it and kind of drawing parallels with her more recent performance in Saint Maud, where again, she's like able to, she can be quite brittle, but there's a lot of depth going on. And yeah, she's phenomenal on, you know, on-screen presence. So very strong cast. And with regards to a particular scene, for anyone who's about to watch the film for the first time, so again, not giving too much away, like for me personally, there's a scene which involves going to a concert, and I was really affected by that, because I found it quite uncomfortable looking at how people responded to the music. So that for me is something I would encourage people to look out for and watch, and maybe they'll share my discomfort or maybe they won't. But for you, was there any particular scene that you'd encourage people to kind of keep an eye out for?
I just to say quickly on that scene, which I also loved, partly because it's a contemporary band, but they've managed to find a band that sounds exactly like music of that time, so it totally transported me back to 1993, and it's brilliant because it's this band called Wild Yorp, and from what I can tell, it's like a queer band. So they stuck a kind of, it's three women, but they've stuck a kind of Kurt Cobain lookalike into it to kind of give that atmosphere, but it's like Christian rock for these kids. So it's a brilliant scene in all kinds of ways, just the way in which you know, there is this kind of brilliant queerness to the whole film, which is fantastic. And I mean, on that note, I guess, yeah, one of the things that's really great is the way that the film makes use of dreams and memories, kind of woven into Cameron's experiences of the camp, as she tries to figure out like who she is and how to position herself in relation to this awful place and this experience. You know, is she going to get on board with it and try to change, or isn't she? And so I love the way that it's not a particular scene, but I just love the way, you know, we're in a is it a memory, is it a dream, is it actually happening? And that's kind of, it really contributes to this whole feeling of the atmosphere of adolescence, which I think the film captures brilliantly. And she really knows as well, like, you know, Akaban and her cinematographer just knows when to hold a camera and let us sit with the awkwardness of a scene. So there's a brilliant scene towards the end of the film where you're just watching a character eat cereal, and it's so poignant. And you just sit just almost a little bit too long with that moment, and you just really feel it's the awkwardness of that scene, and kind of there's a lot of poignancy to it, which you'll understand when you actually watch the film.
Great. Well, thank you so much for choosing it, and thank you to everyone who is about to watch it. You're going to have a very enjoyable hour and a half or so experience, and there'll be a lot to talk about. So I hope you're able to chat to someone about it afterwards, or just watch this video again, and then maybe you'll be like, oh yeah, now I see what Isabelle was talking about, or oh yeah, maybe Jenny had a point, maybe. But yes, Isabelle McNeill, thank you so much for sharing a film you love with the Cambridge Film Trust.
Thanks, Jenny. I really enjoyed it.